Hi and welcome to Mrs. Long's third video on figurative devices and errors. As I mentioned in the previous two videos, you need to remember that when learning about these devices, you should be able to give the definition of each device, name the device by reading the definition. You should be able to recognize the device when used in different contexts and should be able to explain the effect of the device in the given context. Now, the devices we're going to be looking at today are those to do with opposites. Okay, so specifically oxymoron, paradox, and antithesis. So oxymoron, most of you would have come across this previously. Here we look at our example. This painting is pretty ugly. You can imagine somebody saying that looking at a painting. Now, an oxymoron is when you have two words which are completely opposite in meaning and they are juxtaposed, placed next to each other. So here in this example, you'll see pretty and ugly. So when we explain an oxymoron, we need to identify the words that are opposite to each other and then comment on the effect in the context. So here you've got the description, pretty ugly. Now, some of us may say this and know exactly what we are meaning to say. You know, it's when you want to say something is fairly ugly. It's a colloquial use. But obviously, when we look at it more critically, pretty and ugly are opposite words. So they actually contradict each other. But when you put them together, they create this this descriptor which we use to describe something that's not really ugly, but it's pretty ugly. It's kind of ugly. Okay. So let's look now at another example. So this is the one where you can pause the video, spend a few moments looking at the example of the little boy suggesting to his friend, let's do nothing. And once you are ready to check your answer against the memo, you can click through or unpause and continue watching the video. So obviously the oxymoron there is do nothing, because doing is an action and nothing is lack of an action. So you cannot be doing something and doing nothing at the same time. So again, this is kind of poking fun at the way we use language, because in colloquial spoken language, we would understand saying let's do nothing means we don't want to be active and just relax. The same is pretty ugly. When you sort of unpack it strictly according to the rules of language, it doesn't make sense. The oxymoron is clear, but used in informal language, we kind of understand the intended meaning. Okay. Now we move on to paradox. Now, paradox and oxymoron are similar in that they both deal with opposite meanings. Here you can see the example. It's a quote from The Picture of Dorian Gray. One of the characters says, I can resist anything except temptation. I like using that phrase. So a paradox is a statement which seems to be contradictory but actually contains some truth. So just like an oxymoron is two words that contradict each other, this is a statement where the ideas seem to contradict each other. And like an oxymoron, it's usually a phrase we understand, the usage is understood in the colloquial sense. The same is true of a paradox. When you take it apart, it actually can be true. So you're explaining an oxymoron, you identify the words that are opposite and explain how the contradiction can be true. So here, how could you resist anything, but you can't resist temptation, because temptation would be anything. But if you actually unpack it, then if you say you can resist anything except temptation, that means you cannot resist anything. So exposes a truth about human nature. We're easily tempted and we find it difficult to resist. Okay. So if you could resist anything, there wouldn't be any exceptions. And obviously, if you say except temptation, it's taking out all the exceptions. Right, so here is your example of paradox. Feel free to pause the video, spend a few moments thinking about how you would explain the example before unpausing and clicking through to the answer. So the example here is, My only love sprung from my only hate. That is uttered by Juliet in Romeo and Juliet. Okay, so here clearly the paradox is love springing from hate. It seems impossible that love could come from hate, but in the context, this is true because Juliet has fallen in love with Romeo, who is the son of her family's arch enemy. Okay, so he's the only one she loves, but he's also a member of the family, which is the only family that her family hates. So yes, love can come from hate, even though it sounds like it's an impossibility. And that's what paradox is all about. The last one in this video is antithesis. Again, it's not one that you need to know for to be too familiar with in grade 10, but it will certainly come up in language later on in your high school career. So antithesis is where opposites are placed further apart, kind of in a way that balances the sentence. Okay, so like a paradox, we've got opposite ideas, but they're placed on either side of the sentence so it balances well. Here's an example. Love is an ideal thing, marriage a real thing. Okay. So you've got the contrast there between love and marriage, ideal, real, lovely balance there to the sentence. Antithesis is often used in rhetoric and speeches and things like that because of the pleasing nature it has on the ear and also how it's a good way to represent ideas. Okay, so that is all for this video. We'll see you in the next one.